Hey folks, welcome back to TheByteBit. So in this continuing series, we're going to be moving on with security and access and authentication. This is part of the administrative series that I'm doing for Linux admins here. And in today's video, we'll be focusing on just looking at users and IDs and also a combination of who's logged in, what they're doing, and how we can go about getting a picture of that information from the terminal. Again, you can also look at this through multiple applications. There are free and native applications that come with every OS. That, of course, will be provided if and when you use a GUI with the operating system or a desktop environment, rather. But I'm going to use a terminal because that will ensure that you'll be able to get this information pretty much in whatever distribution or flavor of Linux that you're running. Do keep in mind that maybe the file name might be a little bit different based on the OS, but that's something that you can easily just quickly Google or look through as long as you know what you're looking for. Okay, so I'm on the desktop here. I'm going to right click and open up a terminal for me, and the first thing I'm going to do is just type in the letter W and hit enter. So W is actually a command that is an amalgamation or grouping of other data from other commands, such as what the processes are doing on the system, user information, session information, remote information, things like that. And this is actually a great command to keep in mind. It's a single letter, really hard to forget. And I did want to initially include it in the last video, but really this goes along much better with the user access and grouping and authentication. So that's why I left it for this one. So let's take a quick look and see what the W command actually offers us, right? First of all, you can see the current time, and it tells you the uptime of the system as well. So you can see that's been up for 37 minutes. I just applied some updates and rebooted the virtual machine. I can see how many users are logged into the system, which is good. And I get my load average, right, which is from the CPU usage. So again, the first set of numbers is the first minute or 1 minute interval, second is 5 minutes, and the third is 15 minutes. And as I mentioned in the last video, seeing something at 1.00 or 2.003 doesn't necessarily mean that the system is overtaxed or that there is a significant problem. You also have to look at the virtual CPUs and the processors and all that. So definitely refer to the video number 2 in this series, which is the previous one, if you want to take a look at more information on what that's all about. Below that is a table that you get a bunch of useful information on. The first is actually the users that will be logged in. This is just a virtual machine I have, so I only have one user logged in here, followed by the TTY. TTY is, think of that as a terminal session, your keyboard, your mouse, your monitor. And essentially this session can be virtual or physical. Think of it in a way that you would use a virtual machine or VMware, right? You can have a physical operating system that's been installed onto hardware, actual hardware, and then you can have a virtual operating system in a virtual machine. So TTY is a session. You can actually spawn multiple sessions within the same physical session. That is perfectly allowed in the Linux world. In fact, I think when Linux operating systems boot up, they spawn multiple sessions by themselves. So it's not uncommon to see TTY 2, 3, 4, and so on based upon the user and the role that they're playing. Okay, the from column will basically tell you where the user's coming from, whether it's local or it's from a remote machine or a remote address. Very important to keep in mind. In fact, as we go through this video, one of the sort of overarching concepts I'd like to bring across or put across is that you really want to start building patterns that you train your brain to see as soon as you start bringing up this information. Do I see an individual logged in more than most? Are they supposed to be logged in? When we take a look at the authentication logs, coming up in just a minute, you'll want to take a look and see which IP addresses might be logging into the system or trying to log into the system, where they're coming from. So start building those patterns about what's happening to the server and how it's being affected by users and processes. Login at is the time that the user logged in, so 10:57, how long the user has been idle for, and then you have JCPU and PCPU. Okay, J is for joint, meaning it's a total cumulative time of all of the processes for this one particular session. Okay, you can have the user logged in multiple times. The user could be logged in from a PuTTY session, which is a remote session. The user could be logged into the terminal or the console itself. So the JCPU is the total amount of time for processor usage for that session. important to keep that in mind. And then you've got the PCPU, which is for the current process. So this 0.09 seconds is actually for this command, okay? So if I type W again, you see it's gone up to 59 seconds. And if I keep repeating, it'll probably stay where it is because I'm not really doing much in this GNOME terminal, okay? I'm not really doing much, so it doesn't really jump up or spike up. Let me invoke another terminal. I'm going to do a quick ping, and you'll see that that number will speed up. So let me go ahead and just right-click here, open up another terminal. I'm going to keep a ping to Google going, and then if I type the W command again, you'll see it jumps up to 72 seconds. Maybe even more if I, 74. Okay, so that's what it's technically showing you as well. And obviously, because we're now invoking more tasks into the terminal, the joint processor usage should also jump up as well, right? So that kind of goes hand in hand with the other. Okay, so that pretty much takes care of the W command, which again is a sort of grouping of a lot of good information that you can take a look at a glance, get how the system is doing, plus the users are logged in, what those users are technically doing. Now notice it doesn't give you a play-by-play, meaning it doesn't give you an actual command line history of what the user is actually doing. You have to extrapolate what the user is actually trying to accomplish or what the user may be doing based on either the what command or the authentication logs, and then kind of build a picture from there. So next we're going to take a look at the authentication logs as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at those log files now, and in particular the authentication log file, and see what it has to offer. So I'm just going to clear the screen here, and I'm going to go cd var log. Now, as I mentioned in the last video, the var log folder will have 99% of the logs in the system. So if you want to look at the behavior of something, an application, a system, a process, really that's where you should start, unless it's some third-party application that for some reason has their logs in a particular folder like the temp or something like that. So important to kind of start here. And of course, if I do an LL or a list, you can see there are a bunch of log files to kind of deal with. And this is just a standard virtual machine with not that much software, not that many users, not that much interaction. So your system, if it is a live box, will certainly have a lot of logs in the folder. So it's best to kind of go through them, you know, when time affords you the ability to kind of look through the names, kind of get an idea of what they do. And as I mentioned in my last video, I do go over some of the major logs and what we're looking for. So in this portion here, we're going to look at the Auth.log. So I'm just going to do an LL, and then I'm just going to AUTH with a percent, or an asterisk, excuse me, just to kind of get the search here. And you can see that I have an AUTH log, a 1, and then the GZ. To find out why this has actually been zipped up, again, I would reference the second video because I kind of go into detail there. But we're going to take a look at this authentication log, so I'll just say cat authentication log. And again, cat is a command that will take the contents of whatever file you pass to it and print it to the screen. And again, a lot of information here, but I just wanted to go through some overall basics of what you'd expect to see in this. First of all, this will provide for you all of the history for sudo commands. That is to say, users that type in the sudo command and then followed by a particular command itself, like if they want to look at the password file or the shadow file that we'll look at in just a second, if they type in sudo space and then a command, you will see it in here. You will see the user and what they actually typed in. The authentication log won't give you a play-by-play. It won't tell you every single history of every command that the user typed in, because that would just, you know, kill the system, right? But if you're looking at authentication and session and security, this is the log to start with. And again, depending on your system, this log may be named a little bit differently, but that's something you can just quickly search and find out. So apart from the history of sudo access, you'll also look at the login attempts. That's from users that are connecting in remotely or from attempts to connect in from other countries and destinations. In fact, you'll be given IP addresses in this log. This is a virtual machine, as I said, fairly new. Not that much has been hit to it, or not that much data has been hitting it over the course of time. But you will see IP addresses, for those login attempts. And what I recommend is that when you do see a pattern, again, of a particular IP address that is trying to connect over and over and over again, definitely use like an IP lookup service. They're free. You can just Google them, and you can just type in that IP address and kind of get some information, maybe what location, where it's coming from geographically, kind of give you an idea of what's going on. Also, it's useful in here to kind of help you harden or strengthen the firewall or rules of a particular box, especially if it's in, say, the DMZ, or if it's outside the firewall, where it has direct access to the internet and people connect to it directly. So very good kind of idea to spend. And this may be a little bit monotonous and a little bit tedious to kind of go through and look through the logs, but again, this is what your administrative duties will call upon for sure. So it is worth getting a cup of coffee, sitting down and going through this log file and kind of understanding what it is that you're that's going on. In fact, let me just show you one example here, so you can see that the user, this was me, this was my session that I was using, and then this is my directory that I was in. PWD just means print working directory, and it's showing you that the user is root, so it's trying to run this command. And I tried to initiate the sudo command, or the sudo command, and I ran cat sudo. So I can clearly see what the user did, and I can then go back and extrapolate and get an idea of what I need to do for that security purpose, if there is a security issue at hand. Okay, so that's the login here, and then of course also if their users typing in the wrong password, you'll see failed password attempts in here as well. So if you do see that there's one particular user that keeps logging in and failing to log in, like maybe root or some other user that has high privileges, then you might want to take a look at and see if that's coming from the source that you'd expect, maybe like a local computer, as opposed to China or Italy or Rome or something like that. So well worth keeping in mind these points. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and clear out the system here, and I'm going to go back to the home directory because I just want to show you how to do that. If you actually type in CD and then the tilde sign, which is above the tab key on the left hand side, that'll take you right back to the home directory of any user that you're currently logged into. And we're going to look at the password file. So I'll say cat etc wd, and I'll enter that. So the password file is actually, it doesn't have any passwords at all, right? All it's got is user information and groups, which is important to have. There's actually another file called shadow that actually has the passwords in there, but of course there's a hash, so it's not actually the passwords in clear text, which would obviously be a huge security issue. So looking at the password file, you can see that it gives you the username. The X implies that there is a password here. It's just been hidden for you. It gives you the main group, the main login group, or the user's primary group. And then it gives you the user's secondary group if it does happen to have one. So you can see here that there are multiple user accounts. And obviously, I didn't create these user accounts. There'll be accounts that get created as part of the OS install, as part of applications that you install, and they don't necessarily mean that they're going to log in. You can have a bunch of users in the system whereby they exist, they're live, but because they don't have a password, they won't be able to log in, or you can lock them down so that they don't log in. So it is not uncommon to see these users in here that you do. And then of course it gives you a bunch of other information here, like the home directory. It gives you the shell that they're going to use. It also gives you a comment that you can apply, which in this case is just a username or a friendly username that it lists out. Now obviously we're going to take a look at the password file as well, but it is worthwhile mentioning that if you do go to the authentication log that we just did, and you do see a user that is, invoking the sudo command or trying to use the system to perform administrative duties that you're not sure of or not familiar with, this is sort of the process you take. You can go in and kind of find out about the user and then look at their groups that they're a part of, and then kind of reach out to them, see if they're deserving of performing those administrative tasks. So once we took a look at the password file here, I'm going to go ahead and clear this out. And I'm going to use ID. ID is a command that'll bring back those user groups that we were just talking about. So I'll say, so here is the ID or information for the ByteBit, the user that I'm currently logged in as. And you can see that you get the UID, you get the group ID, that's what it's a part of. You also get other groups that the user is also a part of. So you can see that it's a part of the ADM group, CD-ROM group, sudo group, DIP, and so on. So this is a good way to kind of get a picture of all of the groups, primary and secondary, that a particular user is a part of. Might help shed light on whether or not the user should be performing actions that he or she is doing, right? And whether you need to curtail that or open that or allow them to do that as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the group file next. So I'll say cat etc group. Actually, this may yep, okay, I was wondering if it would actually ask me to use the sudo command. But here is the group file. Again, you get the group name, you get the X for the password, if this is the login for it. Obviously, it's hidden or masked out for you. You get the ID, and then you get the users that are part of that group. So you can see that the Samba Share group exists, the ID is 129, and it has the ByteBit user as a part of it. And you'll see it listed out here with all the users. So that's good to kind of keep in mind here. Let's go ahead and clear that out, and let's take a look at that sudoers file. So I'll say cat etc. Okay, so I do need to run sudo, so sudo cat. So sudoers file is a file that allows you to set explicit permissions for administrative access or restricted access to the box. And this file really, you should never modify this file manually. There is actually a vi sudo command, which is actually here. It even points that out as the very first line of the text file, of the file, and that's what you would use to actually modify the users and permissions. Well, I'll put out a video that explicitly goes over that, so you guys can take a look at that if you're interested in that. And then it actually lists out a couple of different sections, right? So you have host privileges, user alias specification, command aliases, user privileges, members, and the allow members group. So if you take a look at root, so this is the user root, and it's got everything, all, okay? And then you have members. So if you see the %sign, that's an indication that it belongs to a group. So the admin group also has all privileges on the system. And then you see the sudo group will also have all. And of course, root that I invoke allows me to perform administrative tasks. So that explains why I can pretty much make any change, delete any file, so on. I can go ahead and add in the ByteBit into the sudo group or the admin group or any other user that I've just created, and they would then have privileges as well. And again, as I said, I will show you guys in another video how to use the vi sudo command and modify this file as needed. Okay, so that pretty much covers the authentication section with the logs and users and groups and the W command that I wanted to go over. Hopefully you guys found that informative and helpful, and I will catch you guys in the next one, and thank you again for watching.